Normally, in order to get freight, a load is scheduled, the driver is assigned, they go to pick it up, they get loaded, or they do a drop and hook, leave an empty trailer, pick up a loaded trailer, and they head on their way to delivery. They get to delivery safely, and they either drop and hook, drop off the loaded trailer, grab an empty, or they get live unloaded. And everything's great. But there are lots and lots of things that can happen out there on the road to cause freight to go bad. So today we're going to be talking about when good freight goes bad on Trucking Tuesday. Come along. Hi everyone, I'm Jen. I work in the office in a trucking company and I love to share what my job is like. This week we're covering what happens when good freight goes bad. Or, in other words, all the places that there can be issues out on the road with a load of freight. These can be at the beginning, during, the transition from shipper to receiver, and at the receiver. So let's start at the very beginning of the load. There are several things that can happen to cause a load to go bad at the very start. One, there could be no driver to be assigned, which means you're going to have to scramble. Maybe you'll have to have a late pickup. Maybe you'll have to give the load back, tell the customer you'll have to wait till another day. If it's a brokered load, you may have to cancel it. If you can find someone to assign to the load, then there's problems that can start with an appointment. For example, maybe an appointment wasn't made, or maybe the appointment was made incorrectly for the wrong date or the wrong time. Or maybe the driver is coming in from another load and they're late. Sometimes shippers can be incredibly busy, especially if it's a live loading situation, and they may not have an appointment for a day and the driver could be left sitting. If the driver has a nighttime pickup, rescheduling an appointment can be exceptionally hard and may have to wait until normal business hours the next day, or if it's the weekend, until Monday. So there's several ways that could cause a delay right at the beginning of the load. If the driver gets there on time and everything goes well when they check in, there could be issues with the pickup number or the number of pallets or pieces that are supposed to be loaded onto a load. So this has to be reconciled as well. A lot of times they'll give drivers a copy of the paperwork. This can be sent to the customer. The customer can verify or deny what's supposed to happen, and then they work it out with shipping, and then hopefully the driver is allowed to get loaded and leave. Another thing that could happen if it's drop and hook freight, if the shipper doesn't have enough empty trailers, what could be a drop and hook will have to turn into a live load and the driver will have to wait to get loaded. And this can be a huge problem because if you know from watching this series before, once drivers' clocks start, they can't stop. And if they were planning on doing a drop and hook, they may not have the hours, which means they'll either have to stay at the shipper until they get loaded and then finish out their rest period, or they'll have to leave on PC with permission of their carrier. Another thing that could happen once the driver gets loaded is there could be an issue where the destination isn't correct. For example, a load that can say that it's supposed to go to Los Angeles may be going to San Francisco, and this has to be reconciled. If the load is actually supposed to be going to San Francisco, is the driver okay with going there? Who's going to take care of the difference in the miles? Who's going to make sure that a new appointment is arranged for what was supposed to be Los Angeles and now is San Francisco? Another thing that could happen is the number for the trailer or the number for the seal or both may not match the paperwork. And per DOT regulations, everything on the paperwork has to match. The destination, the shipper, the seal number, the trailer number, all of these have to match in order to be legal for DOT. Another thing that could happen once the driver gets loaded is they have to go scale their load. And if that load doesn't scale out correctly, if it's too heavy or unbalanced, the driver will have to go back for a rework. Even if the load is drop and hook, they still have to go get the load scaled in order to be legal. And if it's not legal, they have to return. Most of the time, most customers will pay a driver to be worked. Sometimes they won't, and the carrier will have to eat that expense so that the driver is not losing time and money waiting for a rework. So that's just the issues that can happen with loading. Once the driver's loaded, scaled out, and ready to go, they have the proper paperwork and everything seems to be fine, then there's issues that can happen on the road. And these can happen in several stages. One, there could be issues with the trailer or the truck. Trailer and truck breakdowns can happen at any time. Sometimes these are fairly minor, such as a blown tire. Sometimes these are pretty major, such as a catastrophic engine failure or a serious trailer breakdown involving an axle. If a driver would happen to run over something, this can cause multiple tires to be damaged. It can also damage the hub seals on the wheels. It can damage the axles. There's all kinds of things, and these breakdowns can cost anywhere from a few hours to a few days, depending on how significant they are. If it's a significant breakdown, such as the truck is going to be down for several days waiting for repair and or parts, a lot of times the carrier will work on recovering the load, and hopefully your driver's with a good carrier that will cover their downtime or work on getting them into an alternate or sub truck. At my carrier, we work on getting in people sub trucks within less than 12 hours if the truck cannot be repaired. Trailer repairs, we may ask for what's called a transload, so that a service will be called out and they'll move the freight from the damaged trailer to the new trailer. Another thing that can happen is accidents. Most of these are minor, fortunately, and we covered this in a previous one. I'll link that video at the end of this one to discuss accidents, but sometimes they can be major. If it's a minor accident, such as a truck stop, fender bender, assuming there's no significant damage to the truck or trailer, those usually don't cost the driver too much time, maybe filling out a police report and accident report, and they're on their way. If it's a serious accident, it could be anywhere from some pretty significant trailer damage to a total loss of trailer and freight. This can involve insurance claims. If the driver's injured, another party's injured, there can be police and ticketing involved, and all of these can cause very significant load delays. If the load is catastrophically destroyed, the load will no longer continue, obviously, and there'll be insurance claims and the driver will be put on another load if and when they're healthy to do so. Another thing that can happen is accidents that don't even involve the driver, or other forms of traffic backup, such as construction, just general road delay because of time of day or the city that you're in. All of these have to be accounted for. Good drivers will do a load plan and they'll look at where they're going on the route from the shipper to receiver, and they'll put in time to accommodate for these slowdowns. For example, if there's known construction in the area or a bridge that's closed, the drivers will work to route themselves around it and account for that time. At my company, we try to have drivers avoid tolls just because we try to save that expense, but sometimes that does add extra miles, so the drivers have to plan that in that trip time as well. This could also mean that drivers are driving into a more heavily trafficked area, which will also involve time for them. They have to make sure that they have the time built into their day to get around any traffic or accidents involved. And any time delay for any reason can cause issues at the receiver. So let's talk about what can happen at the receiver. If the driver doesn't have an accident or any other delay, the receiver as well just may be backed up. So maybe someone was late, they treated him as a work-in, that throws all their appointments off for the day. But if our driver is late, they can either have to be rescheduled or treated as a work-in. Either one of these is going to cause sometimes significant downtime for the driver. It could be hours, it could be days while a new appointment is obtained. A lot of that depends on how strict the receiver is. Some customers are super strict and it could take 24 to 72 hours to get a new appointment obtained, and the driver is stuck waiting during that time. As a carrier, you're responsible for taking care of the driver and their downtime, because if they're not rolling, they're not making money. Sometimes you can ask the customer for help with this. Sometimes you just have to take the expense as part of doing business. Other reasons for delay could be that maybe the paperwork doesn't match. Maybe it matched perfectly at the shipper, but at the receiver it doesn't match. Another reason could be what we call OS&D, which is overage and shortages at delivery. It also includes damages. For example, if a customer unloads and realizes they have a pallet of merchandise that doesn't belong to them, they're not going to receive it. We have to reach out to the customer or the shipper, find out why that was loaded, and then decide what's going to be done with that product. Usually the drive from the shipper to a receiver is too far to send the driver back. So if the product can be donated, then it can be donated, or it may have to be destroyed. Another thing to be concerned in terms of damages and overages and shortages, if there's any delay getting to a receiver, There may be an issue if the driver is carrying fresh food. Fresh food only has so long of a life, even in a good reefer trailer, and it may be past its prime and be rejected for that reason. Sometimes, if it's safe to eat, it can be donated. Other times, it has to be destroyed. If there's a shortage, this has to be reported as well. Sometimes the customers will just accept it and move on. Sometimes the driver is not allowed to leave until this is reconciled with the paperwork. If anything is damaged, a lot of times it will be rejected at the receiver, and again, something will have to be done to get that product or products off of the driver's trailer. This involves taking pictures, reaching out to the customer, making sure everything's documented, and then someone has to make a decision. And this can take anywhere from hours to a day or two, depending on whether or not it's the weekend. Other issues that can happen at a receiver would be if it's a drop and hook and there's no empty trailers available. If a driver has a next load, they are going to have to be sent to another facility, hopefully close by, but that doesn't always happen, to get an empty trailer. So as you can see, there are tons of things that can happen to cause a load to go wrong. Most of them are not even usually the driver's fault. So a lot of times it's paperwork or human error. Things happen out there on the road, but it's just one more thing that drivers have to face when they're carrying freight. And that's why those of us who are in the office try to be as prepared as possible to help drivers with these situations, to get them resolved as quickly as possible. Because if you're not driving, you're not making miles or money, and you're not smiling. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of Trucking Tuesday. If you're a professional driver, I would love to hear from you. If you like this topic, I encourage you to like and subscribe. I do trucking videos almost every Tuesday. We cover a variety of topics about the transportation business as a whole. Thanks so much for watching, and stay safe out there.